When my parents came back from work, they rudely woke me up, scolded me without hearing a word of explanation, and even complained about the mess I'd made on the carpet. This time, things took an unexpected turn. I awoke dry and comfortably in bed. My confusion didn't last long, as my twin sister, who was supposed to be studying abroad, suddenly entered my room. "Little sister, have some ginger soup," Sophia said, offering a bowl with a smile. Shocked, I asked when she'd come back to the country. She explained that she had just arrived and asked if I had saved someone recently. Hearing this, I immediately realized she had been reborn as well, and earlier than I had. Without hesitation, I confirmed I was the one who had saved him. Her eyes sparkled as she started probing for details in a subtle, roundabout way. Internally, I sneered at her attempts, mocking her for trying to take advantage of the situation again. If anyone else wanted to compete for Michael, the dangerous psychopath, I might have given them a fair warning. But my sister, who had killed me in my past life and was now after him again, would get no mercy. I was even prepared to offer him to her on a silver platter. Feigning dizziness and fatigue, I drank the ginger soup and asked her to fetch me some cold medicine. Once she left, visibly annoyed but restrained due to her current need for me, I lay down and closed my eyes. I paid her no further attention, determined to conserve my energy for dealing with the manipulative schemes that awaited me the next day. The following morning, I felt rejuvenated despite a slightly blocked nose. As I entered the living room, I noticed my parents were unusually dressed up, and my sister wore a provocative outfit reminiscent of a glamorous stepmother, designed to highlight her figure. Clearly, she was ready for battle. My mother gave me a sharp look and said, "You don't need to make breakfast today. An important guest will be visiting soon. Stay in your room." As usual, I obediently complied. Of course, I knew their intentions. Back in my room, I ordered takeout, ate quietly, and then overheard some commotion from the living room. Smirking, I stepped out with the trash in hand. "Mr. Michael, it was me who saved you yesterday," I declared as soon as I opened the door. Sophia eagerly ran over and interrupted, trying to claim credit. When I looked up and saw Michael, I pretended to hesitate, as if I had something to say, but stopped myself. My mother rushed over, covered my mouth, and hissed, "What nonsense are you spouting? It was your sister who saved Mr. Michael yesterday. He came to visit her." She then turned to Michael with a fawning expression and said, "Mr. Michael, this is Sophia's younger sister. She's inexperienced and often says things without thinking. We hardly dare let her speak in front of guests." Michael, always intrigued by the unusual, seemed curious about me. My sole intention was to create tension and make Sophia feel uneasy, not to steal Michael's attention. Sure enough, he looked intrigued and remarked, "No need to be so formal. Does your sister know me?" Michael had been in the headlines recently due to scandalous rumors, including allegations of abusive behavior exposed by an online personality. Although his family silenced the matter with money, the victim ultimately could not escape, becoming part of his disturbing collection. Knowing this, I timidly lowered my head and softly murmured, "I saw you in a magazine." Michael raised an eyebrow and casually replied, "Nowadays, people spread all kinds of rumors for money." Sophie immediately chimed in, "Exactly. I could tell it was fake news the moment I saw it." Michael then asked for my name. I lowered my head even further, mumbling, "Emily," while my family glared at me with hostility. However, Michael's interest seemed to wane upon observing my shy and unassuming demeanor. Even so, I remained calm. My mother had pinned the story of finding me unconscious on the floor the previous night onto Sophia, recounting it with tearful conviction. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Michael gently patting Sophia's head with a fond smile. I couldn't help but relax slightly. Knowing his preferences, I was sure my sister's rounded skull appealed to him. After I had saved him, he'd measured my head with his hands as well. Michael clearly knew it was me who had rescued him, but he chose not to acknowledge it, instead allowing my parents and sister to deceive him. The reason was obvious. He was satisfied with the shape of my sister's head. Michael instructed his staff to leave various supplements before pulling out a check for 18.88% yuan, declaring his desire to marry his savior. My family's eyes sparkled with greed as they eagerly agreed. After Michael left, my mother grabbed a feather duster and stormed toward me. We lived in an old apartment building without underground parking, and our unit was on the 5th floor. I quickly dodged and rushed to the window. "Mom, Mr. Michael hasn't gone far. I can still call him back to verify what happened yesterday. My uncharacteristically firm stance left her momentarily stunned. Sophia, alarmed by my threat, snatched the feather duster and said hastily, "Mom, let's talk this over calmly." Turning to me, she complained, "Sister, it wasn't easy for Mom and Dad to raise us." "Don't keep upsetting them," I sneered. "Mom and Dad are helping you steal my fiancé, a handsome and wealthy one at that. How is this my fault?" "Fine, I won't waste my breath. I'll just go to Mr. Michael myself." Pretending to open the window to call for him, I saw Sophia panic and step forward. "Sister, I'm sorry. Please don't make a scene in front of Mr. Michael." Seizing the moment, I made my demand. "Give me the check, and I promise to keep this secret forever. I'll even let you marry into wealth as you wish, and provide the rescue details for free." When my mother realized I wanted everything for myself, she was furious and charged at me again. I immediately opened the window wider, halting her in her tracks. My father, realizing he wouldn't see a penny of the 18.88% yuan, trembled with anger. "Ungrateful brat! We should have drowned you at birth." I rolled my eyes. He should be grateful they didn't drown me. Otherwise, who would have served as their unpaid maid for over a decade? Now, they wanted to exploit my efforts to achieve their ambitions while refusing to share the rewards. Did they think I was running a charity? I glanced at Sophia and deliberately hinted, "Mom, Dad, if I marry into wealth, you could also live a better life." As expected, Sophia grew anxious and pulled our parents into another room. A few minutes later, Sophia returned, glaring at me bitterly as she handed over the check. After successfully transferring the funds to my bank account, I cheerfully revealed the rescue details to her. With the money in hand, I packed my belongings and left home immediately. They were too busy celebrating their impending prosperity alongside Sophia to notice my unusual behavior. I, meanwhile, was in my senior year of college and about to start an internship. Armed with this money and foreknowledge of the next 3 years, I decided starting a business was my best option. In the past, I dreamed of being a relaxed landlord, but if not for being reborn, this money would have gone to waste. Now, I turned my focus to live streaming, which was just starting to gain traction. I wasn't skilled at cultivating talent, but I knew who the future stars were. I quickly registered a media company and invested 1 million yuan without hesitation. Within a week, the office was set up, and within a month, I signed contracts with all the live streamers who would become famous in the future. At that time, they were still struggling, streaming over 10 hours daily for barely enough to get by. I arrived with capital like a savior, offering favorable terms to these budding talents. Seeing their uncertainty about their career paths, I smiled and provided personalized coaching tailored to how they would achieve fame. In the company's first month of operation, their popularity began to rise. After reviewing the latest performance data, I picked up the financial report and casually answered my phone, which had been ringing persistently. As soon as I answered, Sophia's sharp voice rang out. "Sister, why haven't you been answering?" My mother's angry voice quickly followed. "Emily, you're living quite the life, aren't you? You took the money and vanished. Come back immediately to cook and clean. We've moved to a new house and the chores are piling up with no one to do them. You have 1 hour to show up." I curled my lips. "I'm not coming back." Sophia tried to provoke me. "Are you jealous I took the husband who was supposed to be yours? Is that why you won't return?" Glancing at the profitable figures on the financial report, I smiled coldly. I let a faint smile appear on my face. "I genuinely respect your decision and sincerely wish you happiness. May you and Michael remain bound together forever." Sophia scoffed, clearly dismissing my words. "Then what are you so hesitant about? Come back and see our new home." I dropped my gaze briefly, deciding it was best to see what scheme they had in store. It's always smart to know what your opponents are plotting. Following the address she sent, I arrived at the villa where I had lived after marriage in my previous life. It was a small, 3-story Western-style house with an open gate. The entire house was decked out in festive red decorations. As soon as I stepped in, Sophia greeted me with a smug grin, displaying the betrothal gifts. "Sister, you're back. This will be our home now. Michael bought it for me. I just mentioned wanting a grand wedding and a big house, and he immediately got this villa for me. He even said it's a gesture of gratitude to Mom and Dad for raising me." Her smugness was unbearable. Sweet talking seemed to come so naturally to Michael. Judging by how well their verbal theatrics matched, these two really were a pair. My mother approached with a small bowl of fruit, hand-feeding Sophia a longan. With a satisfied look, she declared, "Our Sophia is so capable and thoughtful. Michael respects us because of how much you care for your parents. His love for you extends to us. Truly wonderful." The mutual flattery between the two was nauseating. My mother cast a pointed glance at me, but her attempts to provoke no longer stung. Instead, I felt a twinge of pity for Sophia. Ours was a modest, working-class family, and Michael valued appearances greatly. Even without me making such requests in my previous life, he had purchased this villa and given it to my family. Michael's personality was such that he was willing to offer something on his own, but he detested being pressured for it. I found myself looking forward to Sophia's wedding night. My father emerged from the kitchen, setting a cup of bird's nest soup on the coffee table. His face practically glowed with delight as he said, "Sophia, Michael brought this top-tier tonic as part of the betrothal gifts. Drink it once it cools down a bit." The irony struck me. This soup had ended up in the same person's stomach in both my past and present lives. Life can indeed play strange tricks. Although I was the younger sibling, I had always been reserved. While Sophia seemed born with a knack for charming others, she manipulated our parents into treating me like a maid. And in my previous life, she successfully pushed me to make endless sacrifices for their family of three. When Michael proposed in my previous life, my parents, overwhelmed by his family's wealth and status, considered swapping Sophia in for me. When Sophia later killed me, she had even complained that our parents deliberately concealed Michael's background, out of fear that she couldn't handle the pressures of a wealthy family, causing her to miss out. In truth, if I hadn't sent her money to live abroad, she wouldn't have tolerated my enjoying the life of a rich wife for 3 years. Her reason for killing me this time was simpler. Abroad, she had fallen into gambling, drugs, and other vices, and her growing appetite for money became insatiable. When I couldn't meet her exorbitant demands, she decided to remove the middleman and take my place. However, after she ran me over, her car veered into a truck. Now it seemed Sophia, like me, had been reborn. I wasn't sure what she had told our parents to overcome their earlier hesitations and secure their blessing. Watching my indifferent expression, she seemed displeased. She tugged me to the sofa, opened two jewelry boxes with great flair, and said triumphantly, "Look, these are the jewelry sets your brother-in-law picked for me and Mom. He insisted we wear them at the wedding. I told him we didn't need them, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. Sister, he even mentioned giving you a set, but I declined. After all, we're not wealthy, and we should know our place. But don't worry. As long as you behave sensibly, I won't forget you, even when I'm living in luxury." Her blatant gloating demanded a reaction. I feigned envy, saying, "Brother-in-law is so generous. I've heard these sets are incredibly expensive." Sophia chuckled softly, her pride growing. "It's fine. Both sets together cost just over 10 million yuan." I pretended to be stunned, like someone unaccustomed to such extravagance. She shot me a condescending look. "You're acting so surprised over something so trivial. It's pathetic. Tomorrow, most of the wedding guests will be high-ranking officials and elites. Don't embarrass me." I nodded with a foolish grin. Satisfied, she asked nonchalantly, "By the way, where did you spend the over 10 million yuan from the betrothal gifts?" I couldn't leave empty-handed today, so I replied playfully, "Sister, don't tell me you regret it and want to exchange your brother-in-law for my money?" Sophia's face twisted in irritation. "In your dreams." She wasn't naive. Once she married into the Michael family, she'd have access to endless wealth. My mother's disapproving gaze made it clear she shared Sophia's sentiments. "I couldn't achieve much in life, but your sister is giving you a chance to prove yourself. If our family returns the 18.88 million yuan as a dowry, the Michael family will hold her in even higher regard. Once she's living comfortably, could she possibly forget her own sister? In my past life, when I got married, I never saw a single coin of that money. Now, with our roles reversed, they expected me to use it to smooth Sophia's path into the Michael family." Stubbornly, I replied, "All I know is that I sacrificed my opportunity to marry into wealth for my sister. If you want the money, Then I'll choose the life of a rich lady myself. It's one or the other, and I don't care. My mother's anger flared at my refusal. Her frustration so intense, it seemed her teeth ached. You ungrateful brat. You're so short-sighted. With that dumb look on your face, you wouldn't last an episode in a drama about wealthy families. Big and powerful families have their challenges. Your sister is marrying into that world to endure the hardships on your behalf. And yet, you still refuse to be thankful and say such hurtful things. Sophia's expression turned pitiful, her eyes reddening as though deeply wronged. Emily is still young and doesn't understand. She doesn't see the good intentions behind this, she said softly. Sister, I want to marry grandly, so I can hold my head high among Michael's friends. It'll help build relationships and pave the way for you to join this circle too. Then you'll be able to live this kind of life in the future. Hearing her words, our parents were visibly moved, showering her with praise for being such a thoughtful daughter. My body, however, couldn't stop trembling. Anyone who could form bonds with that lunatic, Michael, was bound to be just as twisted. Remembering the depraved hobbies of his associates from my past life made me feel as though I had been plunged into icy water. Sophia, now entering that circle, wouldn't hesitate to sell me out to gain Michael's favor. I had already died once, and didn't dare to gamble on a second rebirth. Survival meant I had to rise above Michael's influence. Becoming someone his family would have no choice but to respect. Yet earning money quickly enough was a challenge. Suddenly, inspiration struck. I saw a loophole in Bitcoin. Making up an excuse, I hurriedly left, setting aside 1 million yuan as reserve funds and investing the rest all at once. The next day, Sophia's lavish wedding made headlines nationwide. Completely unlike the understated elegance of my previous life, it was clear she had orchestrated the extravagance. The event reportedly cost 2 billion yuan, with each guest's gift box valued at 100,000 yuan. Sophia's gown, encrusted with diamonds and gemstones, sparkled under the lights as she smiled radiantly, walking down the red carpet. Michael, in his trademark white suit and gold-rimmed glasses, exuded refinement and charm. As the ceremony began, the officiant recited the vows. When it came time for Sophia to pledge her love, respect, and acceptance, she beamed with joy, envisioning the luxurious life awaiting her. Her voice, sweet and confident, rang out, "I do." A fleeting, eerie smile crossed Michael's face as he gently stroked her head. "Baby, we'll be together for a lifetime," he said tenderly. Overcome with emotion, tears rolled down Sophia's cheeks. "Michael," she replied, "not just this lifetime, but the next one, and the one after that, too." The guests cheered and teased the couple with good-natured humor, thoroughly enjoying the lively atmosphere. Only the two best men exchanged knowing glances, their expressions cryptic. Yet, amidst the festive mood, no one noticed these subtle details. After enduring the banquet, I was about to slip away when Michael's voice stopped me. "Emily, why are you leaving so quickly this time, too?" My heart raced. Was he hinting at my abrupt departure after saving him in the past? A cold sweat broke out on my back as I forced myself to turn and face him calmly. Sophia's face tensed as she stared at me intently. Putting on the timid demeanor he remembered from our first meeting, I said quietly, "Brother-in-law?" Michael smiled warmly. "You're always so busy. I never see you at home. And now you're trying to be the first to leave the wedding. People might think I'm terrifying or something." The gentler he appeared, the more I thought of his hidden side, the part of him that collected human skulls and ended lives. Forcing a stiff smile, I feigned awkwardness and unease. Noticing his attention on me, Sophia grew anxious. She quickly interjected with a laugh. "My sister is incredibly shy and doesn't talk much. During her first 3 years of college, all she did was eat, drink, relax, and sleep. She skipped so many classes that her professors are now on her case to catch up on credits and finish her thesis." Her intent was clear. She was desperate to prevent me from catching Michael's eye. Her words painted me in a bad light, but I didn't mind. Lowering my head, I nodded in agreement. Our parents chimed in to support her. "Emily, didn't you say your professor asked you to return to school quickly? Hurry up and go. It'll be a hassle if you can't graduate." I took this chance to slip away unnoticed. The following day, when Sophia returned to her family home, my mother called me, her tone firm yet quivering with emotion, demanding that I return to the Emily family. I was taken aback. Could it be that Michael had already corrupted her in just one night? After all, in my previous life, he had waited a whole month before making his move. When I learned that Michael hadn't gone back with her, I immediately dropped everything and rushed home to witness what was unfolding. As soon as I walked through the door, I saw a worn-out Sophia. She was even wearing a long-sleeve, high-neck shirt in the middle of summer. The bright, happy look she had yesterday was now gone, replaced by a stark exhaustion. I wondered why Michael had acted so quickly. But as my eyes caught the sight of expensive new custom-made clothing on her and the emerald bracelet worth millions from last week's charity gala, everything clicked. It seemed she had already taken a lot of things before her wedding, which explained Michael's haste. He had already figured out her weakness and knew he could control her with money. When she saw me, she rushed over, grabbed my arm, and dragged me into a small room. After closing the door, she glared at me with fury. "Emily, you've been reborn too, haven't you?" I looked at her in confusion. "Reborn, sister? I don't understand what you're talking about." Seeing that I wasn't pretending, Sophia paused, but then her expression turned hostile again. She grabbed me by the neck. "Don't lie to me. Did you know Michael was a pervert? Is that why you handed me over so easily?" Despite her aggression, her weakened state after a night of torment allowed me to break free with a little effort. I backed away, feigning fear and confusion. "Sister, what are you saying? Brother-in-law is very kind. He even said yesterday that he wanted to be with you for a lifetime. I didn't give him to you willingly. It's just that I knew Mom and Dad would support you. I couldn't stop it even if I didn't want to." I pinched myself discreetly, holding back tears as I continued. "Seeing your wedding yesterday, I regretted it so much. I wish I could have changed things." Sophia, not noticing my acting, seemed convinced by my words. After 2 attempts to probe me, she lowered her guard and agreed with my reasoning. Although Michael hadn't accompanied her back to her family home, he had given her a card to buy more luxury items. Remembering this, Sophia's tension eased. She raised her wrist to show me her Rolex, smiling as she said, "Stop spreading rumors. Who said Michael has a bad temper? He's been very kind to me." Opening the door, she spotted our parents eavesdropping and immediately took their arms, acting affectionately. "Mom, Dad, look at my sister." She took the money and now she's trying to come between Michael and me. She must be plotting to take my place. Hearing this, my parents were furious. They pointed at me, accusing me of being heartless and coveting my brother-in-law, advising Sophia to hold tight to him, this rich son-in-law. I was used to their twisting the truth. Crossing my arms, I leaned against the doorframe and said calmly, "Mom, Dad, I didn't think that way at first, but if you keep pushing me, I'll just have to do as you say." The 3 of them fell silent, glaring at me with resentment. I deliberately returned their glares with a look of my own. Sister's now living in luxury. She bought a house, and I invested all my remaining money in stocks, which are locked up, so I can only work hard. Unlike sister, who enjoys endless wealth and luxury, even bringing you to live in this big house. Mom, you're right. I was short-sighted. I regret it deeply. The regret was clear in my tone, but when I saw the smug look in Sophia's eyes and her indifference towards me, I knew my visit hadn't been wasted. Before I left, I made a few more remarks to provoke her. Since she'd always had a taste for luxury, she immediately became excited, planning to take our parents on a shopping spree for cars and jewelry. To punish me for not giving her the dowry money, I widened my eyes, pretending to be envious. "Sister, you're now the daughter-in-law of the richest man. When you go out, you're surrounded by luxury cars and designer bags. Our Emily family should buy a car worth tens of millions of yen to uphold your dignity as the young mistress of the Michael family." At the mention of such an extravagant price, my parents' faces lit up, and they praised Sophia once again. As they prepared to head out for a shopping spree, I allowed myself a slight smirk, hoping that Sophia would become even more indulgent tonight. I gladly assisted Sophia with her self-hypnosis, and after that, she would occasionally send me brief videos showcasing the lavish life she was leading with the Michael family. Each time I received those 60-second voice messages, I couldn't be bothered to click on them. Every night, I would glance at my phone and send her an envious emoji. Of course, when I had a bit more time, I'd also type a few lines. "Brother-in-law is so nice to you, sister. I'm so envious of your life." Repeating these 3 lines seemed sufficient to deal with her. During this time, several of the live streamers I had signed on had gained over 1 million followers and were now aiming for 10 million. After holding Bitcoin for a month, I sold half of it gradually, earning a net profit of 10 million won. With this money, I immediately began recruiting skilled product selection professionals, building a team to ensure quality control. At the same time, I personally trained them in live streaming and product promotion, adapting their speaking styles to match their personas. Before my rebirth, the live streaming and product promotion industry was already well established. Now, applying what I knew felt like a huge advantage over others who were still exploring the field. These live streamers, who had already shown potential in their previous lives, were clearly talented, and with my unique knowledge, they quickly rose to fame. Within 2 months, the commissions from these live streamers alone earned me tens of millions. In this emerging industry, I made a name for myself, earning the nickname Star Maker in e-commerce. I was stunned when I first heard this, but it gave me an idea for further profits. I invested all the money I'd earned from the live streaming business into movies that were lacking funds, but became hugely successful after release. Even when I didn't have enough capital, I took out loans to invest. This strategy earned me the gratitude of many well-known directors. I also formed connections with many actors, directors, and investors, and as the popularity of the films grew, so did my wealth. With my foresight, I invested in other promising industries. These investments shattered previous records and established me as a famous investor in the business world. I successfully entered the capital circle through my network. My assistant reminded me that I had an important dinner that evening. The event was at the opening of an exclusive club with fewer than 200 members nationwide. Since it was a private gathering organized by a friend, I wore casual clothes. To my surprise, I ran into Sophia there. She seemed taken aback when she saw me. "Sister, what are you doing here?" she asked, narrowing her eyes and adding, "Did you see my posts and sneak in here, pretending to flirt with my husband?" I was shocked as well. I hadn't seen Sophia in over 6 months, and she looked completely different. She had lost weight, and her once round face now looked gaunt, with prominent cheekbones. Despite heavy makeup, her tired appearance couldn't be hidden. Her voice, sharp and shrill, only emphasized her mean and bitter attitude, replacing the youthful energy she once had with a cold, calculating demeanor. I was left speechless at how obsessed Sophia was with female rivalry. Even someone like Michael, who had such perverted tastes, would likely find her off-putting. Just as I was about to respond, I noticed Michael and his group of sleazy friends stepping out of a private room. They surrounded me, bringing me back to the most helpless moment of my previous life. My body shuddered slightly. "Michael, is this your wife's twin sister? They look so alike," one of them said. "You're lucky, Michael. Can you even tell them apart? When you went back with your wife, did you accidentally enter the wrong room?" They laughed maliciously. Sophia looked a little uncomfortable as she sized me up and down. "Sister, why are you so vain? Instead of working hard, you're always trying to attract men to spend money on you." I clenched my fists, fighting my inner rage. One of the perverts, who was into making human-like dolls, licked his lips and smirked. "Sister-in-law, this little girl just hasn't seen enough of the world. Since she's here, let's have some fun tonight." Michael, impatient with the situation, shrugged and said, "All right, sister, come in and join us. It'll be more fun with more people." The other's eyes lit up with excitement. I knew that if I went inside, they would tear me apart, treating me as nothing more than another victim to collect. Thinking about the career I had worked so hard to build, I forced myself to stay calm and smiled. "Sorry, I have an appointment with the CEO of Phone Group. You guys carry on, I'll leave first." They burst into laughter again. "Miss, if you're going to make an excuse, at least make it a good one. You don't even know the CEO's name, do you?" Michael reached out, blocking my path. He raised an eyebrow and grinned. "Sister, I didn't know you had such an interesting side. You're really something," and I chuckled, trying to appear casual. "It's just a coincidence today. How about I play host? I'm sure you all know Mr. Hang. Since we're all together, why don't we take the opportunity to catch up?" Michael's group laughed at this, convinced I was just making up stories. I casually shrugged and guided them into the private room. "Sorry for the delay, Mr. Hang. Something unexpected came up on my way," I said. Mr. Hang stood up, smiling. "No problem. Everyone knows how busy the investment guru is." A few other business leaders also teased me lightly. I humbly replied, "No, it's all thanks to your kind words, bosses. I'm just a newcomer in this field and still have a lot to learn from all of you." Mr. Hang looked over my shoulder and said, "Isn't that young Master Joe?" Everyone turned to see Sophia. Though she had lost weight and now looked about 80% like me, they quickly assumed we were related by blood. I ignored the questioning look in Sophia's eyes and made a brief introduction. Michael and his associates, although surprised, quickly suppressed their shock because the individuals attending were almost as influential as the Z family. They would need to address them as uncles. They greeted everyone present respectfully before leaving, clearly disappointed. Watching Sophia's expression as she departed, I realized that my time was running out. At the dinner, the conversation flowed smoothly, and several potential collaborations had a significant impact on my future plans. However, one thing was clear. I needed more ways to generate income in order to complete my final counterattack against those villains. They had blood on their hands, and unless I rid myself of them, my heart would never be at peace. I already had a plan in mind. I quickly instructed my team to establish an entertainment company and handed a list to several agents. There were many actors who would rise to fame in the future, but hadn't made their mark yet. I was determined to be the one who discovered them. The stars of tomorrow were still relatively unknown, and I offered them top-tier cooperation terms. For some actors whose contracts weren't yet up, I was willing to pay the liquidated damages to lure them over. I had no choice but to rely on them to stay loyal after they became A-list stars. To my surprise, my approach left them confused, and since the company was newly formed, they initially thought I might be a scammer. Fortunately, I had Wu Jing, a renowned director, vouch for me, which allowed me to recruit the future A-listers under my management. I quickly paired them with projects that would make them famous. And once again, I made a lot of money. Soon, I became well known in the entertainment industry, with rumors spreading that anyone I signed would undoubtedly become a star. But I didn't have time to care about these empty reputations, as I was so busy that I often wished a day had 48 hours. Sophia called me and sent numerous WeChat messages, but I couldn't find the time to respond. Finally, after a few days of being free, I noticed the 999 plus notification on my WeChat and sent Sophia a message explaining how busy I had been. She immediately called me via voice chat. When I saw her on video, she had changed so much. She was so thin that she almost looked like a different person. Her eyes were bloodshot, and despite the sunlight coming through the room behind her, the gloom surrounding her couldn't be hidden. "Emily, you've been reborn, haven't you? That's the only way you could succeed in every investment. You must also know Michael's true nature. You deliberately took my money and even encouraged me to marry him." Leaning back in my chair, I took a sip of coffee and casually responded, "Sister, what are you talking about? Did you have another argument with brother-in-law? I think you're not in the right frame of mind. How about I call the psychiatric department of the 4th hospital for you? They're very good, and we shouldn't avoid seeing a doctor just because we're afraid of what the diagnosis might be. Don't worry about the cost. The Michael family's rich." Sophia burst into tears and leaned closer to the camera. "Sister, please save me. I've heard you're rich and powerful now. You surely can help me. We're sisters, born of the same mother, and spent 10 months together in her womb. I can't take this anymore. If this continues, I'll be tortured to death by him." I raised an eyebrow and smiled. This was just the beginning. In my previous life, I had reached a point where I had nowhere to turn for help. I managed to escape only after carefully planning it. Who would have thought she would block my way and run me over with her car, ultimately killing me? Back then, she never thought of letting me go, and now she still expected me to save her. Without hesitation, I ended the call, blocked her number with one click, and smoothly opened up my Candy Crush Saga game. After just 2 hours of entertainment, my parents probably got my address from Sophia and showed up to cause a scene at my office. They stormed in like crazy women, pointing at me and shouting, "Emily, you're so evil. You knew Michael's true nature, but still pushed your sister into his clutches. Go to the Michael family and trade your life for hers." I was stunned for a moment. They had completely forgotten how they forced me to give up my chance to marry into the Michael family and gave it to Sophia instead. "Mom, what about me? If I trade myself for her, what happens to me?" I asked. Without missing a beat, she replied, "This all started because of you. No matter what, you should bear the consequences. You've made your company huge, but you haven't spent a single penny on us. You're so ungrateful. That hardship should have been yours from the start." My father didn't say anything. I could tell from his eyes that he agreed with my mother. I curled my lips and laughed at myself. What if I didn't go? My father shot me a cold glare and warned, "If you don't go, don't blame me and your mother for tarnishing your reputation online. All the money you're making now is tied to your online presence, which must be very important to you." I sneered. "All right, I'll go after work." To make sure I wouldn't change my mind, they waited outside my office the entire time. After work, I followed them to the Michael family's residence. When Sophia saw me, she grinned, her eyes bloodshot, and her body so thin that it seemed like nothing but skin and bones. The unhealthy state of her mind was even more evident. It was clear that she had been involved with dangerous substances. Once you're caught up in that world, it's difficult to break free. No amount of money could make up for the damage. Would Michael be willing to keep her around? It would be surprising if he didn't torment her to the point of death, just to get his money's worth. It was laughable that she still looked so smug, as if my coming to her, despite blocking her before, was some kind of victory. "All right, Mom, Dad, you can leave now." "I'll go back later," I said, listening as they reminded Sophia to take all her things when she left and not leave anything behind for me, the ungrateful one. As soon as they were gone, Sophia ordered the bodyguards to escort me to the basement, where Michael was already waiting, along with several other perverts. The atmosphere was still as familiar as ever. Water flowed continuously from the pool beside a large bed, and the table was scattered with small toys. The walls were lined with various instruments designed for peeling and dismemberment. Sophia smiled as she introduced everything to me one by one, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. She pointed at a glass display case in the center of the room, which was half filled with skulls. "After you've been tortured, you'll soon join these in my collection," she said. I stared at her blankly, offering no reaction. Sophia, clearly dissatisfied, raised her hand to strike me, but Michael's cold voice stopped her. "What right do you have to touch my collections?" he asked, his voice as chilling as a snake slithering across the ground. Sophia shuddered, instinctively stepping back and standing quietly beside him, not daring to speak. Michael then motioned toward the pool beside him. "Go and take your punishment," he said, his tone icy. Sophia looked frightened and protested weakly. "Michael, I've already brought her here to replace me. Can I leave now?" Michael seemed to find this amusing. "You know all my secrets. Do you really think I'd let you go?" Sophia, trembling in fear, knelt at Michael's feet, her voice pleading. "Michael, you promised. I swear I won't say anything. Please, believe me." Seeing this, I shook my head and smiled. Michael, curious, asked, "What's so funny?" I shrugged and replied casually, "I'm laughing at someone so foolish as to trust the words of a devil." Sophia, realizing I was mocking her, became enraged and tried to charge at me, but she hesitated, fearing Michael's response. Michael, now more intrigued by me, asked, "Your sister said you were married to me in your past life, and that's why you took the money so easily and gave her to me." I frowned in exasperation and replied, "Mr. Michael, look at my sister's current mental state and her behavior toward me. She'll make up anything that could cause me the most harm." Sophia quickly denied my claim and intensified her attacks on me. She hadn't gotten any smarter after all this time in the Michael family. No wonder she could only endure for such a short period. I rolled my eyes, too tired to engage. Michael, however, grew less suspicious of me, and as a result, his punishment for Sophia grew harsher. She lay on the floor, bruised and battered, begging for mercy. "Emily hasn't been punished yet. She's much more interesting." "Try her," Michael said, his voice filled with excitement. As she begged for mercy, several of Michael's companions looked even more eager. Sophia's fingernails began to fall off, and soon it was her fingers that were suffering. She endured the pain, still conscious but crying in agony. With a smile, Michael looked at me and said, "Don't rush. It's not your turn yet." I slightly lifted the corner of my mouth. "Mr. Michael, aren't you going to join in?" I asked. Michael gave me a meaningful look before joining in as well. I quietly pressed a gem on my pinky ring, and within a few minutes, I stood on the ground floor of the Michael residence, breathing in fresh air. I watched with interest as the police raided this den of iniquity. Thanks to all the evidence I provided and the exposure of their evil deeds, Michael's parents were sentenced to 20 years in prison for various crimes, including covering up criminal activity, harboring criminals, and bribery. In my previous life, Michael became my husband after being reborn. My older sister, however, tried to marry him before me by pretending to be me. I was genuinely impressed by her audacity and quickly made sure Michael witnessed her exposed deceit. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself reborn to the day I first rescued Michael in my former life. After saving him from drowning, I returned home drenched and collapsed on the floor.